Every Friday for 2 years, Ines left a different book on the same library shelf. She never signed her name. She never expected anyone to write back, until someone did. It started by accident, the way most good things in Ines's life seemed to dot. She'd finished a battered paperback on the train, a novel about a lighthouse keeper who talked to ships that never answered, and rather than let it sit in her bag for another month, she left it on the return shelf at the Ashford Public Library, tucked between a gardening manual and an outdated encyclopedia, in the corner nobody browsed. She'd written one line in pencil on the inside cover, almost without thinking, "If you finish this, I hope it finds you at the right time." She didn't expect anything from it. She just liked the idea of a book having a life after her, the way some people like leaving a good tip, or holding a door a beat longer than necessary, small, invisible kindnesses that ask nothing back. 3 weeks later, she went looking for something else to read in that same corner, out of habit more than intention, and found the lighthouse book still there, but different. Someone had written beneath her line, in blue ink, careful handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone who thought before every word, "It found me exactly on time. Thank you for trusting a stranger with it." Ines stood in the library aisle for a long moment, feeling something unexpectedly warm settle in her chest. She didn't know who'd written it. She had no way of knowing. And somehow that was the whole point, a message with no name attached, meant for no one in particular, that had landed on someone anyway. She left another book the following Friday, a collection of short stories this time, with a new line inside. "This one made me cry on a bus. Hope it does something to you too, whatever that ends up being." 2 weeks passed before she checked again. The book was gone from the shelf entirely, but a different one had appeared in its place, a poetry collection she didn't recognize, with a note tucked into the front page in that same careful blue ink. "Took your story home, left this one in its place. Seemed like a fair trade. I don't know your name, and I like that I don't. Feels like the kind of thing that stops being what it is the moment it needs one." That was how it started, not a conversation, not quite a friendship, something stranger and gentler than either. Every few weeks, a book would appear or disappear from that shelf, a note tucked somewhere inside, never signed, never asking a direct question, never demanding a direct answer. Ines began to recognize the handwriting instantly, a particular way of crossing the letter T, a habit of underlining just one word per note, like a small, private emphasis meant only for her to notice. She started calling him, in her head, the shelf. It felt easier than admitting she'd started looking forward to Fridays more than she used to. Months passed this way. The notes got longer slowly, the way trust does when nobody's rushing it. He told her, without ever meaning to, things about himself he probably didn't realize he was revealing, that he worked somewhere with early mornings, based on notes clearly written before dawn, that he'd lost someone recently, based on a comment tucked into the margin of a grief memoir. "This one's harder to read than I expected. Needed it anyway." That he had a dry sense of humor, revealed slowly across a stack of comedic novels, each note drier than the last. She never wrote her name, he never asked for it. It became, without either of them ever discussing it, the one rule of whatever this was: the moment a name entered it, it would become something else, something with expectations and stakes, and the possibility of disappointment. As it was, it stayed exactly what it was. Two strangers, trading books, leaving small pieces of themselves in pencil and blue ink, in a corner of a library nobody else seemed to visit. A year in, Ines left a note that surprised even her. "I think you're the closest thing I have to knowing someone, and I don't know your face, your name, or your voice. Is that strange? I can't decide if it's strange." 2 weeks later, the response: "I think it's the least strange thing in my life right now. Everything else about my life is complicated. This is the only part that's simple." I don't want to ruin that by making it complicated too. She understood, reading it, that he meant it as a kind of boundary, a gentle way of saying, "Let's not make this into something it can't survive being." She respected it mostly. She told herself she respected it entirely. There was a Friday, about 14 months in, when Ines arrived at the shelf, and there was no new book. Just an envelope sealed, her invented nickname written on the front in that same blue ink, "To whoever leaves the books." Inside, a single page: "I don't know how to say this without it sounding heavier than I want it to. My sister passed away 3 weeks ago. I haven't told anyone the way I want to tell someone. Everyone at work asks how I'm doing in that voice people use when they want you to say fine, so they can stop worrying. I found myself wanting to write it here instead, To someone who's never once asked me to be fine, I don't know why that matters so much. But it does. Ines read it standing in the aisle, and without thinking too hard about what it might mean, she went home, and instead of a new book, she brought back an old one from her own shelf, one her own mother had given her the year her father passed, years earlier, worn soft from handling. She left it with a note of her own, longer than any she'd written before. I lost my dad 4 years ago. I still don't know how to talk about it out loud without people deciding it's their job to fix how I feel. I never needed it fixed. I just needed it heard. I hope this book does for you what it did for me, which wasn't make it hurt less, exactly. Just made the hurting feel less like something I had to carry alone. 2 weeks later, the shelf held a response, and for the first time, it wasn't tucked in a book at all. It was a full letter, folded carefully, longer than anything before. I think I've been in love with a stranger for over a year, and I don't know what to do with that, because the moment I know your name, I think I lose the version of you that exists in my head, the one who's kind without needing anything back, who reads what I actually mean instead of what I say. I'm scared the real you might not be her. I'm more scared that she might be exactly her, and I'll have wasted a year not knowing. Ines sat on a bench outside the library for a long time after reading that, watching people walk past who had no idea what had just landed in her chest. She wrote back the only true thing she had: I've been scared of the exact same thing. I think we've been protecting something we don't actually need to protect. Meet me here, same shelf, next Friday 6 p.m. Bring nothing. I just want to know your name. She almost didn't go. She stood outside the library doors for 10 minutes on that Friday, coat pulled tight, telling herself there were a dozen reasonable explanations if no one showed: a missed note, bad timing, a version of him that had gotten frightened the same way she almost had. At 6:04, a man approached the same shelf, hands in his pockets, visibly as nervous as she felt. He was maybe her age, dressed like someone coming straight from an early shift, dark circles under kind eyes that looked like they'd cried more recently than he'd probably admit. He saw her standing there and stopped, and for a long moment neither of them said anything, both of them searching each other's faces for something they'd only ever known through handwriting. I'm Daniel, he finally said. Ines, she said back, and heard her own name sound strange out loud, like something being returned to her after a long time away. He smiled, small, careful, the same energy as his underlined words. I've read your handwriting probably 400 times. I didn't expect your actual voice to sound like this. Good different or bad different? Good, he said. Really good. They stood there a long moment, two strangers who weren't strangers at all, in the exact corner where an entire year of two lives had quietly passed back and forth in pencil and blue ink, never once needing a name to mean everything it already meant. So, Ines said eventually, nodding toward the shelf. What do we do with this now? Keep leaving books for each other, but you know, in person? Daniel laughed, and it was a real laugh, warm, nothing careful about it at all. I was actually hoping, he said, we could start reading them together instead. They did for years after that. In fact, married 2 summers later, in the small courtyard behind that same library, with a single shelf of borrowed and returned books set up near the guest book. A quiet nod nobody, but the two of them, and a librarian named Marion, fully understood. They kept that particular corner shelf stocked for the rest of their lives in that town, leaving books anonymously, the way it had all started, letting strangers find each other the way they once had, never signing their names, never expecting anything back. Marion, the head librarian, kept a small note taped inside her office door for years afterward, one she'd found tucked in a returned novel not long after Daniel and Ines's wedding. Its author never confirmed, though she had her suspicions. It read simply, some of the best love stories never needed introductions. They just needed someone brave enough to leave the first book on the shelf.